When the wild geese were brought to Fremantle in 1868, they came in the hold of a convict ship. Hard labour was to be their fate. Your cause is lost. Abandon hope. All ye who enter here, forget your homeland, wife and child, and all that you hold dear. But the wild goose is a noble bird, devoted to freedom's cause. Such could not be left to suffer neath the tyrant's cruel laws. Yes, the wild goose is a noble bird which should never be shackled or caged. And O'Reilly had given his word that a rescue would be staged. The whaleboat waits upon the shore, the rescue ship stands out to sea, with the promise of liberty evermore, inspiring all who care to be free. Our 6 wild geese first flew south to Rockingham by the ocean, away from the prison, the chains and the cat. All of Fremantle is in a commotion. Jump into the whaleboat, put out to sea and pull with all your might. The pensioner guards are gaining and are spoiling for a fight. Against all odds, they reach the ship, the whaleboat wins the race. But the threat of death or capture still stares them in the face. See the Georgette steaming closer, fires a shot across her bow. But Anthony raises the stars and stripe, saying, "You cannot board me now." Too long cooped up in a dungeon drear, at Her Majesty's behest, those 6 wild geese have taken wings to freedom in the West. Now their great migration has begun. See those mighty geese take flight. The quest for justice is leading them on. Fair play and equality are every man's right. After 4 long and weary months, at last they reach safe haven in New Bedford, Massachusetts, where a hero's welcome awaits them. Thank you.
Our opening poem was written by the late Ormond Waters and is to be found in his definitive book on the Catalpa story, The Wild Geese. Absolutely recommend it. Everything is in here on this story. Ormond was an authority on John Boyle O'Reilly and the Irish Fenians who were deported to WA on the last convict ship, the Hougoumont, in 1867. A man who was associated with this memorial here in Rockingham and the John Boyle O'Reilly Memorial in Leschenault near Bunbury. Ormond died in January last year. This morning we'll hear the history of the event being commemorated, the significance and meaning of the design of this monument, which includes the informative plaques. We'll hear the links to the 1916 insurrection in Ireland. We'll hear reflections, poetry, music and song. My name is Tony Bray. I'm the Secretary of the Australian Irish Heritage Association. Our mission is to encourage and promote the awareness of Australia's. Today's gathering is to recognise and appreciate the significance of the escape of 6 Irish Fenian prisoners on this day, Easter Monday, not the date, in 1876. Easter Monday seems to be an important date in Irish history, at home and abroad. But this Rockingham event had international significance, involving Ireland, England, Australia and the USA. The Australian Irish Heritage Association were not formally involved in the commissioning of this monument. This is credited to the late Francis Conlon in 2005. We became involved in February 2011 when Fred Ray, who's up at the back there, producer of the Irish Scene magazine, he approached us to make representations to Rockingham Council to complete the monument to the sculptor's specifications. So we submitted a list of 8 modifications, the greatest of which was casting and fixing 7 plaques surrounding small pillars. We had a letter of support from the then Irish Ambassador, Mr. Martin O'Fahony. These were finally unveiled on Saturday, March 29, 2014, in the presence of the Irish Ambassador to Australia, Mr. Noel White, and the Honorary Irish Consul Martin Kavanagh and His Worship Mayor Barry Salmons, as well as President of our own organisation, Dennis Bratton. Now, Dennis Bratton will now speak on the background to the events that occurred around the escape of the Irish Fenian prisoners at this site in 1876. Dennis.
Welcome everybody. I won't go through the list of names that Tony went through there, because after the first two I forgot the rest of them, so I don't want to insult anyone by leaving them out. But I shouldn't really be telling you the history of this, because the history is very simple. These men were going to rebel against England domination in Ireland. They were snitched on by other people. There was lots of people around about that time, people sort of in behind the scenes, and they were arrested before they ever got their guns out of their holsters or they fired a shot. And they were eventually sent out here, and the 6 of them, along with other Fenians as well, but the particular 6 and the one, John Boyle O'Reilly, ended up in Fremantle here. O'Reilly escaped after 2 years from Bunbury down below from a work party, and he had told his friends that he would send someone back to get them out here, and he did that. He got to America, to New Bedford, on the Catalpa, not on the Catalpa, on the, I forget the other ship, the Gazelle. Very fast ship it was too. It only took about 8 or 10 weeks to get there, but he got there. The IRB, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, Clan na Gael in America, who were the sort of political arm of the Fenian movement. A lot of them had got out of Ireland and gone to America, and of course there's a lot of sympathetic Irishmen there and Americans who were prepared to put money into it. They bought the ship, the Catalpa, rigged her out as a whaling ship. It sailed out here and picked up the other 6 people who came down the coast from Perth, down inland here. We don't know if they actually left directly from here or not, but you can imagine what it was like in the old days before all these buildings and all. There was scrub, no roads, nothing. Came down here in a horse and cart, decanted onto the boat and sailed out to the Catalpa, whereas the English had come down behind them from Perth and the Georgette, and they were hoping to catch them, but of course, as Tony explained, they did not. And it's an interesting fact that today is the 140th anniversary, or around about this time, date-wise, of the escape of the Fenians. It happened 140 years ago, that they took off from this coast to America and eventually ended up there. And that was the beginning of a lot of things, because this year is the anniversary of the 100-year anniversary of the rebellion in Ireland, and it's interesting that it occurs on the same day as the Fenians escaped 140 years ago. Anyway, without more ado, there's a few more speeches to come, so I'll let these people take over. But welcome again, thanks for coming out, beautiful day.
Thank you, Dennis. Now, looking at this monument, not just the one behind me, the pillars, the landscaping, the seating, you have to admire the scale of the memorial, and for this we pay credit to Rockingham Council for the investment they made in commissioning and maintaining it. It's one of the few outstanding historic memorials in WA, and it's a memorial to life and freedom, not a memorial to death. And it will feature in a guide that our organisation are putting together to historic sites in WA of Irish significance. Now, His Worship Mayor Barry Samuels has been a great supporter of this project all along, and it's a great pleasure to have him here today to address us.
Thanks, Tony, and Accordia. Now, did I get that right, girls? Yeah. Accordia? Okay, it's about the limit of my Irish, I think. So can I acknowledge all the distinguished guests that's been previously mentioned, and obviously Councillor Chris Elliott here as well. And as been mentioned earlier on, it's great for the City of Rockingham to be involved in this memorial, and going back when it was originally launched. I think we had some issues earlier on with some of the spelling, but we eventually got there. But we are here today to, I guess, celebrate 2 events that happened about 40 years apart, as mentioned earlier. The first, obviously, was the escape of the the 6 Irish prisoners from Fremantle Jail back in 1876. Very bold and daring but successful escape it was. It wasn't only significant here in WA, but certainly back in Ireland, but also, as mentioned earlier, very significant in Boston because of the American ship Catalpa, which took those prisoners from just out from these shores. And then 40 years after these wild geese took off from this particular spot, and we're not sure if it's this particular spot, but it was along here, along this coast here, the Proclamation of Independence was publicly read in Dublin on Easter Monday, as mentioned earlier, 1916, so some 100 years ago. So I acknowledge the significance of Easter Monday to Ireland and certainly to our Irish community here in WA, but certainly the small Irish population that we have here in Rockingham. In this centenary year of the modern Irish state, Rockingham is proud of our links to the Emerald Isle. So we're happy to celebrate here at this memorial. Well, have a great Easter, everybody. Thanks for coming down.
Okay, we Irish are of Celtic culture and very spiritual, so I think it's time for a spiritual reflection. Imagine back then the desperate homesickness of the Fenians, sent out here on a one-way trip to this penal colony, its infancy, leaving all that was familiar behind forever. So I want you to just relax, look out at the calm sea, let your mind wander over the horizon as Ormond Waters plays an Irish lament on the Irish uilleann pipes. From Easter Monday, 17th of April 1876 to Easter Monday, 24th of April 1916, now being commemorated a century later in Ireland and wherever the Irish footprint can be found in the world, we will hear something of the link between these historic events. Frank Murphy has a career in radio research, production and broadcasting, starting with the Irish National Broadcaster, RTE. Then he was lecturer in media studies at Wesley College. He's presenter of the weekly Song for Ireland on Radio Fremantle 107.9 FM every Saturday from 8 to 10 a.m. and much more theatre production behind the scenes, including the event of the 1916 centenary commemorations in WA, which is a concert in the Octagon Theatre on Saturday the 30th of April called The Sense of Ireland. So before you leave here today, if you're not aware of it, make sure you grab a flyer on the way out on this concert. It is the official event with official dignitaries present. I now ask Frank to give us a little address on the connection between Easter Monday 1876 and 1916.
Gurke Magatoni. Dies Militia, a Gwyn Oyster. Caig me an Gaeling a Currish, Maran Kilbrantels, the Koska, a Horam, a Hortisha, and a modern Alling shop. Is Brantnus More Omachri, it is a beautiful present from my heart. Accept it. Toshe Margulgasarum, it is my duty. The Garmadin the Koska could lush for 4 minutes Ardanga that we hear the sounds of our native tongue. More Heimpel Rockingham, os ard, loudly and clearly. August gan een gonoish nog with an dulgisha arm I virine, and I feel this duty deeply in my heart. I have thought about this, and as we toil and prepare for the task Tony mentioned earlier on, I wondered about, is there commonality? Are there commonalities? The 7 names of the signatories, Pierce, Connolly, Clark, McDonough, Sean McDermott, James Plunkett, and Eamon Kent, which Stephen will be presenting later on, are among the names interconnected with Hogan, Hassett, Cranston, Kelly, Cashman, and of course John Boyle O'Reilly. I want to begin by going back a tiny bit, and allow me, and I will try not to be long. In the writings, I found commonality in the writings of all these noble men. Now, dear friend, this is the voice from the tomb. For is this not a living tomb? In the tomb, it is only a man's body that is good for worms. But in this living tomb, the cankerworm enters the very soul. Think that we have been nearly 9 years in this living tomb since our first arrest, and that it's impossible for mind or body to withstand the continual strain that is upon them. One or the other must give way. It is to aid us in this sad strait that I now, in the name of my comrades and myself, ask you to aid us in the matter pointed out. The names of the 7 men who are actually in prison here in Fremantle jail are as follows: Martin Hogan, Thomas Hassett, Robert Cranston, James Kiley, Thomas Darragh, Michael Harrington. So you see, and I'm still quoting the letter, so you see there are not many of us here, and it would not take very great amount to get us all away. So, dear friend, I will trust this matter to your kindness, and will conclude by assuring you that whether this appeal succeeds or not, that the greenest spot in our memory is connected with you and within us, and that we will never forget that we are still soldiers of liberty. Ever fraternally yours, forgive me, James Wilson. This letter was written, is one of the many letters written when Wilson was having one of the dark nights of the soul, James Wilson, to John Devoy. In sending the letter to John Devoy, Wilson knew, and I'm not going to get into a historical lecture here, he knew that Devoy's obligation to try to assist the Fenian prisoners, because they were deeply conscious of the fact that he had organised them in Fenian meetings in Ireland, and he now was safe and conditionally pardoned in 1871. Earlier in the previous letter, Wilson gives us a glimpse into the future of 3 years before the actual escape. There are some good ports here, where whalers are in the habit of calling. You will perceive at a glance that the number of inhabitants of any of these ports are not very great, a few hundred souls. The chief seaport, Fremantle, is where the convicts' establishment is situated. So you see, it would not be too much of a risk for any vessel, whaler or otherwise, to run in on some pretense or other. And if we had the means of purchasing or acquiring horses, we would make it through the bush to the coast, where the vessel might possibly be anchored. How true, how simple, but yet it was achieved. How would you be so kind then, he says, to ask John Boyle O'Reilly know that we are still alive? Very interesting. That we are still alive. Tell John Boyle O'Reilly. Please convey to him our best wishes for his happiness, and that we would love to hear from him if possible. You see, the cleverness and covert and military intelligence of these men, and had to have the security and the secrecy that was necessary in order that the whole escape be masterminded in 1876. In directing your letter, please avoid putting my name on the outside, says he. Use 2 envelopes. On the outside, the one to Mr. Francis O'Callaghan, Victoria Hotel, Fremantle. And on the inner, put the simple name Red Hugh. Red Hugh O'Donnell was one of the original wild geese who flew from Ireland after the Battle of Kinsale in 1601. So it is a motif that was given, accepted and acknowledged and honoured for hundreds and hundreds of years. By 1876, Breslin is now well ensconced. in Fremantle, in a hotel now known as the Orient. There is a post office directly across the street in High Street, and most of the time there's Morse code flying to and fro, arranging, timing, tides and people and events, as you all know. Eventually, Breslin gets the message. Arrived at Bunbury, American whaler Bar Catalpa out of New Bedford, Catalpa, Captain Anthony, March 28, 1876. But back to the jail, very briefly. Acting controller of convicts, William Fauntleroy, a very unfortunate name, I think you'll agree, he took the added precaution of allowing his immediate subordinate, Joseph Noonan, into his confidence. We are well aware that the tents didn't appear on the skies, and the governor was always aware of the possible escape and attempts, of course. But nevertheless, with regard to Francis Conlon and the Fenian convicts, his policy of agreeing with having the Fenian prisoners working daily outside the prisoners, tending the gardens, was a safer option. The psychology being that by strict confinement to prison in shackles would only make it plain to one and all that suspicion was rampant, and indeed it was. Doonan knew, but Joseph Doonan knew all. There was a risk. He wrote after there was very little precaution, pointing out that these intelligent men were extremely bright and that Fauntleroy had shown astonishingly poor judgment. The late Francis Conlon was referred to earlier on by one of our speakers. He was well known and remembered by us all, and here his significance of his beautiful loving memory, captured by Joan and Charlie Smith and many others, shared in this wonderful history. But he shared with me an anecdote on radio many years ago. Very briefly, it's called Lily Doonan's Secret, he called it. And it's a story which had grown, that the two, Hassett and Hogan, had grown very friendly with the daughter of Doonan. They would talk to her through a hole in the wall. They confided in her on Good Friday that they were escaping on the Easter Monday. They said farewell to her on Easter Monday, and Lily Doonan kept that secret until her deathbed, 87 years later. It's extraordinary. Now, around that time, the pandemonium broke out at 10 o'clock when the escape was discovered. In Fremantle and beyond, there's a living piece of juxtaposition here I've got to share with you. In Fremantle Library, the other day, I came across an image highlighting that on Easter Monday, 1916, there would be a parade of Fremantle fire engines and military display for all to see. In the evening, a display of Easter fireworks. How ironic is that? There are different noises, explosions and guns, and the sounds of gunfire as Porrick Pierce is on the steps of the GPO, as Stephen will recall later, and declared to the world words on behalf of God and the dead generations. The contrast in events in Easter Monday, 1916, in both Dublin and Fremantle, is both darkly stark and ironic. In conclusion, going back very briefly to the journey in the Hougoumont, there's a wonderful piece of poetry by John Boyle O'Reilly to Cashman, where he says to keep his spirits buoyant. On the right of your course be reliant, and onward unswervingly steer. Rise over worldly censures defiant, condemning the frown and the sneer. And though bitter the draught of the trial, O brother, would quaff it with pride, though you drink to the dregs of the vial, still cherish the truth for your guide. Let not frowning misfortune appall you, nor shrink neath calamity's rod. Remember whatever befall you is willed by an all-seeing God. Act yourself, and ne'er trust to another. When duty awaits, never rest. Look onward and upward, my brother, and forget what is the best. John Boyle O'Reilly, 1868. Again, I'm using the gift of words when I come to my conclusion by saying another man in a different country wrote these words about his God. I see his face in every flower. The thunder and the singing of the birds are but his voice, and carven by his power, rocks are his written words. All pathways by his feet are worn. His strong heart stirs the ever-beating sea. His crown of thorns is twined by every thorn. His crown is every tree. Very different sentiments, very same God. Concluding with Pádraig Mac Piarish. Again he wrote in Gaelic, Fernach de Conacho, it means, the hugus ma chulul ar an ashling na chamas ser an road to Rome ma aig the hugus. I turned my back on the vision I'd shaped, and to this road before me I turned my face. And the last words, the hugus ma ganuish ar a road to Rome ar an niv the chim is ar an most the yod. I have turned my back on this road before me to the deed that I shall see and the death that I shall die. The real conclusion, it takes Willie Butler Yeats many months to bring the threads of my embroidered thoughts together, which I present humbly before you this morning. In this extract, tiny extract from Easter 1916, he says, I have seen them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk, among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head, or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I had done of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion around the fires at club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley is worn. All's changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. I write it out in a verse. MacDonagh and MacBride, and Connolly and Pearce, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Good evening, North.
Thank you, Frank Murphy, showing the research Frank puts into his work and reveals the depth and the soul of the Irish psyche. Beautiful. Glasses. The next presentation is very important on this particular day, being the centenary of 1916. I'm going to invite the Honourable Stephen Dawson, MLA, to read the proclamation of the new Irish Republic by the Provisional Government, as read on the steps of the GPO in Dublin on Easter Monday 1916. Please listen to the words and listen to the vision of sovereignty and the guarantee of tolerance and equality. Stephen Dawson was born in Ireland in a Gaelic-speaking household and came with his family to Perth in his early youth. He was involved in the Irish Theatre Players and in the very successful play commissioned by our organisation on the trial of C.Y. O'Connor. Stephen has been a career political activist and campaigner for social justice, and that is just the person that he is, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Tony. It's my pleasure to read this in front of you today. If anyone had the chance or has the chance over the weekend, Google it and you'll see people reading the proclamation outside the GPO this weekend, and it's a tremendous sight. The Proclamation of Public Nahéireann, the Provisional Government of the Irish Republic, to the people of Ireland. Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Having organised and trained her manhood through her secret revolutionary organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and through her open military organisations, the Irish Volunteers and the Irish Citizen Army, having patiently perfected her discipline, having resolutely waited for the right moment to reveal itself, she now seizes that moment, and supported by her exiled children in America and by gallant allies in Europe, but relying in the first on her own strength, she strikes in full confidence of victory.
We declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies, to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of that right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished the right, nor can it ever be extinguished, except by the destruction of the Irish people. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom and sovereignty. 6 times during the past 300 years, they have asserted it in arms, standing on that fundamental right, and again asserting it in arms in the face of the world. We hereby proclaim the Irish Republic as a sovereign, independent state, and we pledge our lives and the lives of our comrades in arms to the cause of its freedom, of its welfare, of its exaltation amongst the nations. The Irish Republic is entitled to, and hereby claims, the allegiance of every Irish man and every Irish woman. The Republic guarantees religious and civil liberty, equal rights and equal opportunities to all its citizens, and declares its resolve to pursue the happiness and prosperity of the whole and of all its parts, cherishing all the children of the nation equally, and oblivious of the differences carefully fostered by an alien government, which have divided a minority from the majority in the past. Until our arms have brought the opportune moment for the establishment of a permanent national government, representative of the whole people of Ireland, and elected by the suffrages of all her men and women, the provisional government, hereby constituted, will administer the civil and military affairs of the Republic in trust for the people. We place the cause of the Irish Republic under the protection of the Most High God, whose blessing we invoke upon our arms, and we pray that no one who serves that cause will dishonour it by cowardice, inhumanity, or rapine. In this supreme hour, the Irish nation must, by its valour and discipline, and by the readiness of its children to sacrifice themselves for the common good, prove itself worthy of the august destiny to which it is called. Signed on behalf of the Provisional Government, Thomas J. Clarke, Sean McDiarmid, Thomas McDonagh, P.H. Pearce, Eamon Cant, James Connolly, Joseph Plunkett. Thank you.
That was a magnificent piece of oratory as well as an important declaration. And the authentic Dublin accent behind it. So well done. Stiffened with pride. Thank you, Stephen. Real passion. We'll now have a beautiful song sung by a daughter of Erin. The song, The Quiet Land of Erin. The singer, soprano Mary Attracta Connolly. Track was born in Perth of Irish parents who were founding members of the Irish Club, and she graduated from the WA Academy of Performing Arts Conservatorium of Music, trained in Rome and London. She's co-producer and artistic director of the award-winning Opera Under the Stars in Broome, and she produced a CD of Irish songs, including the one we're about to hear, this song. The CD is called Deer Park, the location of her ancestral Irish home. And she was for many years musical director of our annual literary Bloomsday Commemoration. Mary Attracta Connolly.
By myself I'd be in Orchickwin, where the mountain stands away, and 'tis I would let the Sunday go in the cuckoo's glen above the bay. Agus och herlig så över vi så the quiet land of Erin. my dreams, and the lonely Sundays pass me by. Agus ó chéir ligí so, land is the quiet land of Erin. I would revel back the twisted years in the bitter wasted winds, if the God above would let me lie in a quiet place above the winds. Agus ó ligí so, land of his the quiet land of Erin.
Feel the distance between here and Ireland, listen to a song like that. It's beautiful, and it shows, though the Irish culture is very expressive, it can travel to humour or depth of the soul, and it's just wonderful, the songs of the Irish. Well, to describe this monument, we're delighted to welcome the distinguished husband-wife team of world-class sculptors Charles Smith and Joan Walsh Smith. Their work is to be seen all over Australia and overseas. In Perth, there's the Kangaroos on the Terrace, the Businessmen Through Time, Percy Buttons in Hay Street, the Burswood Heritage Trail, the John Curtin Memorial in Fremantle, the Migrant Children in Fremantle, HMAS Sydney Memorial in Geraldton, National War Memorial in Canberra, and so many, many. Check the website of Smith Sculptures and see for yourself. The Australian Irish Heritage Association was founded in a meeting in their studios in Gidgegannup in 1993. And they created the Bronze and Marble Brendan Award, which is managed by the Australian Irish Heritage in recognition of individuals or groups who give distinguished service to Australia's Irish heritage. And I'd just like to acknowledge on that note the winner for 2015, presented at the at the St. Patrick's Festival in Leederville, is here today, Joan Ross from the Claddagh Association. Joan does wonderful work for the welfare of Irish who have no one else to turn to here. And it's not a 9-to-5 job. It really happens at odd hours. Well, Joan and Charlie are constantly on a tight schedule, yet they make time to attend this annual event, especially in honour of the late Ormond Waters, who they respected so much. Please welcome Joan and Charlie.
Thank you. It's my turn this year. Who does the talking? Otherwise, we'll keep interrupting each other. But the thing that we were approached by it was about a year, about a couple of years, at least 2 years or so to get this project off the ground. We didn't know a lot about the Catalpa story. We knew of it, but we didn't know that much about it in detail. So we started to do our research, and I think this little poem by John Boyle O'Reilly was the thing that really inspired us. Yeah. Okay. So it's just the tree of liberty will never infoliate and bear fruit unless it is watered from the well of justice, independence, and fair play in the hearts of the people. That inspired us really to design and create a memorial which would do justice to that incredible burning resolve of John Boyle O'Reilly. Even though the Catalpa is all about the story is all about the escape of these 6 Fenian prisoners, behind it stands this towering figure of John Boyle O'Reilly and what he achieved in the prosecution of social justice on a global scale is absolutely breathtaking if people haven't gone into it. I mean, as he's editor of the Boston Pilot, and his pursuit of against the injustices that the American government were enacting upon the indigenous people of North America and the African Americans. So he was a lone voice in the wilderness back in the 1870s when in America, when the wagon trails were rolling west and the lands were being opened up, and the penny dreadful novels of the American West were being written, all lies, as we know now. But he was a lone voice, thundering in these editorials in Boston against this injustice, all fueled by these experiences growing up in Ireland, and the Great Famine and the social injustice that he had to deal with there. When he died, and so tragically young, it was the largest funeral ever seen in Boston. There are 3 huge memorials in Boston to John Boyle O'Reilly, massive things, far greater than this. So his impact on the world stage really was incredible. And we can all be justly proud that he did so much. And in fact, he was following the great tradition of all the other Irish emigres and fleeing injustice over the centuries. And anybody who's travelled to South America, the amount of statues to the great Bernardo O'Higgins, who was simply responsible for freeing so many South American countries from Spanish rule, and so on. I had a singular experience many years ago when we were doing the National Memorial to the Australian Army. We got to know the general in charge of the army, who happened to have an Irish background, Rory O'Donnell, and he told me that he couldn't go back to Ireland as an Australian serving officer because it was forbidden at the time. That was back in the 80s. That no Australian officer was allowed to visit Ireland while the Troubles were going on. So, in some of my research about other things, I came across an extraordinary little piece of information that at the Battle of Stalingrad there was a general in the German army, and I can't remember his full name, but it was Helmut von something von Graf O'Donnell, and he was one of the Wild Geese. He was a Panzer general at Stalingrad. So the story went, for so long and so far. That information was, when Rory O'Donnell, when I gave it to him, of all the things that he ever received in his life, I think it was the most important, because he saw his O'Donnell heritage as being so important, and ironically, or not ironically, but oddly, he was in command of the armour in Vietnam, so he was a tank general too. So the tradition goes for a long way back through history. The same burning desire to propagate freedom and social justice and the pursuit of individual human rights. We've tried to encapsulate this in this memorial, but it's obviously we use mythology to do so, because we could have done 6 figures standing up there or something like that, which probably wouldn't have expressed the whole ethos of the Wild Geese and their historical role in Irish history, and what it means to everybody who is Irish and living outside Ireland. So this is the great tradition of the wild geese. They're sacred to the Celts. All birds are sacred to the Celts, of course, but the geese particularly. They were, the migratory birds, of course, had that element, and they with the main fact about migratory birds that they always return home. So that's very important expression in this. We're sitting in a sacred grove, because the sacred groves were very important to the nomadic Celts. All across Europe they created these sacred groves where they worshipped. So the form of this monument really, rather than memorial, because memorials are usually to the dead, and this is not a memorial to the dead. It's a monument to the living, the aspirations, the successful aspirations of Irish independence. So You're now in a sacred grove. The pillar is actually symbolic of the trees, the sacred trees. Again, these trees all across Europe, the Celts had in these groves had sacred individual, obviously old trees they selected for their age and endurance, and then this so that the column is symbolic of the tree and the tree of liberty and so forth, and it's sitting on very unique actually piece of stonework. I'm not sure if many of you realise, but this stone is ballast from the sailing ships that was found in a storehouse, an old store in Fremantle. So some of these stones could have come from the Hougoumont, some of them could have come, from some of the ships, the Gazelle, or some of them, who knows? But they were, when we found these stones, we thought this might be an opportunity. So the birds are flying to freedom into the western sun and taking with them. And of course, we then belatedly, it took many years to get the 7 plaques you see here, which are Ormond did the layout for them because we couldn't reproduce the whole 7 editions of the Wild Goose written on the Catalpa or on the Hougoumont on the way out. So they're in the Mitchell Library if anybody wants to see the original magnificent volume of the full 7 Wild Goose pamphlets or papers, if you like. So we eventually got, with the AIHA and others, we managed to get it's like the front page of each issue of the Wild Goose, and they're now in bronze for perpetuity here. Hopefully, we will be able to continue this, and there's a few more ideas we have for developing the memorial a little bit further, which we want to discuss with the AIHA and Rockingham Council. So thanks for giving us the opportunity to explain what we're doing and why we do it. It's all about symbolism, it's all about tradition and mythology, but so long as it's had that burning desire to communicate what's really important in life, that's I think then if we succeeded, then we feel very proud to have done that. So on behalf of Joan and myself, before we start interrupting each other,
Very good.
thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you, Charlie and Joan. I do encourage you to look at their website to see the monuments, their legacy all over this country. Get my glasses again. Each year, when the late Ormond Waters delivered his address at this commemoration and at the John Boyle O'Reilly commemoration in Bunbury, he was accompanied by his grandson Luke, who also delivered an address. Ormond will be pleased in the legacy of his grandson continuing in his footsteps. Luke McCrae will now address us.
Leaving San Francisco on September 13th, 1875, John Breslin and Tom Desmond travelled via Sydney and Melbourne. The last leg of the journey from Albany to Fremantle was on the coastal steamer Georgette, a ship which was to figure prominently in later events. Her captain was Michael O'Grady. They arrived at Fremantle on November 16, 1875. Upon arrival in Western Australia, Breslin and Desmond kept apart so as to avoid suspicion. Breslin stayed in Patrick Maloney's Emerald Isle Hotel in Fremantle, posing as a wealthy investor, while Desmond lived in Perth, where he worked at his trade as a carriage builder. The voyage of the Catalpa from New Bedford to Bunbury took about 2 months longer than had been anticipated, which meant that Breslin and Desmond had to maintain their roles for over 4 months while planning the rescue. No easy task. During this time, Breslin took an extraordinary risk by having an affair with Mary Tondit, a chambermaid who worked at the Emerald Isle Hotel. Now Breslin's lover, Mary's sister, Gilderly, was married to Michael O'Grady's brother, Henry, so Breslin and O'Grady were, in a sense, related. The Catalpa arrived in Bunbury on March 28, 1876, and the following day, Breslin was on his way to see Captain Anthony and to make final arrangements for the rescue. The Georgette was due to arrive in Bunbury with mail from Albany on Saturday, April 1st, and it was decided that in order to familiarise himself with the coastline, Captain Anthony should travel with Breslin on the steamer to Fremantle. On the overnight voyage of April 2nd, 1st and 2nd, Anthony was introduced by Breslin to Captain Michael O'Grady and at once commenced to cultivate his friendship. On the morning of Sunday, April 2nd, from the deck of the Georgette, Captain Anthony noted the positions of Rottnest, Garden Islands and other landmarks. The escape was scheduled for Easter Monday, April 17th, 1876. The O'Grady family tradition states that Captain Michael O'Grady had forewarning of the escape, and that he cooperated with Breslin and Captain Anthony by creating obstacles to hinder the employment of the Georgette by the government. The Georgette had left Fremantle on her regular mail run to Champion Bay, Gelton, on April 7th, returning early on Easter Monday morning, very low on fuel. Instead of replenishing his ship's coal bunkers, Captain O'Grady immediately set off upriver to Perth to attend the regatta. He had a long and leisurely lunch at his club before being summoned back to Fremantle by Governor Robson, who had commandeered the Georgette for pursuit duties. The captain was apparently somewhat less than cooperative in making the return journey to the port city. When the Georgette first made contact with the Catalpa, she was so low on coal that she had to break off and return to Fremantle. Her absence enabled the escapees on the whaleboat to reach and board the Catalpa in safety, after the 28-hour ordeal. By the time she had refueled and set out again, complete with cannon, it was just too late. Michael O'Grady was disciplined by the authorities after the escape, losing the command of the Georgette, the most important mail and passenger ship in these waters at that time. For some years after the Catalpa rescue, he corresponded with Captain Anthony in the United States. Captain O'Grady was not in command of the vessel when it broke up later on September 1st off a beach near Busselton. By then, Captain Godfrey was in command of the ill-fated ship.
Thank you, Luke. That thought with you now. Brendan, over to you, my friend.
Thank you. Armand, could you give me something about a tea? Dang. Right, I hope you're on a good voice. 1, 2, 3, 1. A noble Wayne ship and commander, called the Catalpa, they say, came out to Western Australia and took 6 bold Fenians away. Let's hear you all now. So come on, you screw warders and jailers, remember Petriga today. Take care of the rest of your Fenians, or the Yankees will steal them away. For 7 long years they have served here, and 7 long more had to stay, for defending their country, old Ireland. From that they were banished away. When all the boats were racing and making short tacks for the spot, and a Yankee she taked into Fremantle and took the best prize of the lot. All together now. So come on, you screw warders and jailers, remember Petriga today. Take care of the rest of your Fenians, or the Yankees will take them away. The Georgette, armed with bold warriors, went off the poor Yanks to her rest. But she hoisted her star-spangled banner, saying, "You will not board me, I guess." So remember those 6 fountains colonial, and sing o'er these few verses with skill. And remember the Yankee that stole them, and the home that they left on the hill. So come on, you screw warders and jailers, remember Petriga today. Take care of the rest of your Fenians, or the Yankees will steal them away. Now they've landed safe in America, and there they'll be able to cry, "Hoist up the green flag and the shamrock, hurrah for old Ireland. All together now. So come on, you screw warders and jailers, remember Patriga today. Take care of the rest of your Fenians, or the Yankees will steal them away. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. One surprise that's turned up, Dennis is going to mention.
Yes, well, one of the heroes of the whole affair, his name was already mentioned, was a man called John Devoy. He was one of the original Fenians, and he was caught, he was captured and imprisoned for a while, and then the English told him to get out, and he went to America. And he was one of the forerunners in organising the Irish Republican Brotherhood and the Clan na Gael to get the money with others to buy the ship to come out here. And I'm pleased to say that we have in the audience a girl called Tara Devoy, and she's 5 generations removed from John Devoy. This is Tara up here in the black hat. It's really significant to have that little touch of the past. She isn't from the past, but her name is from the past, and it really means a lot to the Irish. So thank you for coming along. That's it, people. You can go home and enjoy the rest of the day. We've got no giveaways or anything else, except a few leaflets here which will inform you about some of the things that are coming up to remember 1916. Thank you all for coming along.